We're sports fans, obviously. And one of the things that keeps us so intrigued to the lovely world of sports is that every year there are these iconic moments that happen when you're watching a game or you're at a game or you're listening to a game and a big play happens or um an iconic call from the announcers happens, and it's just something that you talk about for years and years on end. We all have those moments. We all know exactly where we were when those moments happened, and Ed and I are going to talk about some of the most iconic moments in sports history. I'm David Street, and this is Total Sports Talk. What's up, everybody? I'm David Street. Once again, you may notice that Matthew is out. He's on vacation right now with his lovely wife, but he will be back soon. But iconic moments. Ed and I were talking with some of our buddies last night, just kind of reminiscing on some moments that have happened before. And, Ed, first off, I want to talk about one of the most iconic moments of all time, and that was, of course, the Miracle on Ice in 1980. Now, if you can't tell, I was not around in 1980. I was not around in the 80s period, so I wasn't really there. But I did see the movie Miracle. Great movie, one of the best movies I've ever seen. And yes, I do remember the iconic "Do you believe in miracles?" Yes call. But listen, obviously, listening to a call like that when you're watching a movie doesn't do it justice. And Ed, I want you to tell me, you were obviously there. What was that moment like? Not just the U.S. Men's team beating the Soviets, but just the call. The call. What was all that like?
So first off, I was 4 years old at the time, so there wasn't a whole lot of. Uh,
I think I just called you ancient,
I
basically.
think so, and I have so many questions. First of all, how dare you? Uh, but when it comes to the Miracle on Ice, what I think really resonates with me, it was the perfect call because the Soviets were the unbeatable. They were beyond everybody else in hockey at that time in the international. There was no chance. None. Not for professionals, not for any other countries going into the Olympics. Could anybody actually beat this team? The fact that they, the U.S. team, filled with a bunch of kids that nobody's ever heard of outside of their colleges, then true diehard scouts and all these other things. That was such a huge deal. But what it means to me at this may have been the one thing that happened in this country, and this is why sports is so great. It's the one thing that has happened in this country, full of joy, that pulled the entire country together. It was an entire country chanting USA, USA, USA. Not in your small factions that will do it at different Olympic sporting events, just in that arena. This was an entire country backing this group of kids against the Soviets because it was so much more than sports. It was the geopolitical landscape that proved that America was better than the Soviets. And there was nothing that resonates more with Americans being exceptional in that time period was is sports. So the fact that our guys were able to overcome the obstacle that was the Soviet national team was tremendous. And as I mentioned, it brought the entire country together. Yes, there have been other things that have brought this country together since then, but those were based on tragedy. They were not based on joy. This was pure patriotism. This was pure, we are one unit. We are one country. There is no dividing us. We are all in this together type of deal, like it was for that team. And that's why I put this as one of the top two or three iconic moments of all time. Even though I was not old enough to know what was happening, I was not old enough to understand hockey, which I didn't understand until I was nearly 20 anyway. Uh, but this overall is so huge, such an iconic moment. And it's a place where I'd love to see this world come to again for as divided as we are, because I don't think a sporting event's going to do that at this time in this country right now. But to go back and see what it did for the Joe Schmo in Lincoln, Nebraska, and uh, Bob the Builder in Eugene, Oregon. They all were one team at that time, and it was just tremendous.
Yeah, and I think what's so crazy, and again, this is just based on my knowledge of it, what I know, my research, and all of that. What's really crazy about that team is Ed. I don't think that men's team had any professionals. I think it was all
Nope.
amateur college players. If there were any professionals, maybe there were a couple or a few of them. But it was, I mean, there's a reason why they were massive, massive, massive underdogs against the Soviets. I mean, granted, even if they were made up of all professionals, they would have been big underdogs regardless. But the youth movement that they had was a huge reason for them being really a big underdog. And have you seen the movie Miracle, Ed?
I have not. I've been told I should watch it, and I that's on me for not seeing it. But I've talked to enough people that know
Mm,
what the world looked like at that time that
yeah.
I've gotten a really good idea of how how it affected people across the country.
So one of my favorite scenes from Miracle, and listen, I think we all understand that just because a movie is based on a true story, at the end of the day, it's still a movie, and they're going to embellish some things here and there, just for dramatic effect and whatnot. But I'm assuming that what I'm about to say is close to true. But one of my favorite scenes in the movie was when who was the coach? It was Herb Brooks, right?
Correct.
Okay, so there was a scene when players had a horrible practice, clearly did not give a shit at all, and he basically held them past practice for, I don't know, maybe a couple hours or so. And there was a line he said where he said, "The name on the front of your jersey is a hell of a lot more important than the name on the back of your jersey."
100%. And boy, do I wish a lot of even professional players thought the same thing nowadays.
What was really crazy about that win, Ed, it wasn't just the fact that we beat them in a game that we weren't supposed to beat them, but that was also during a time when really we were rivals with the Soviets in pretty much everything that we did. Like it felt like whenever we did something, they wanted to one up us, or if they did something, we wanted to one up them. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. It was the Cold War. It was, it considered cold because there was not any active fire going between the two entities, but it was a war nonetheless. It was a war of information. And that was really the first war of information that we've had in this world, because that's when technology was starting to ramp up with with nuclear weapons, with espionage, uh, with the back and forth of spies, trying to figure out what each one is doing. It was such a big thing. There were uh, drills in school that we had where we were to get under our desk and hide, in case anything happened. I mean, that kind of went away after the Berlin Wall went down. So throughout the 80s, that was still a thing before Ronald Reagan and Gorbachev had their meeting. But yes, to your point, David, it was a huge rivalry, and it wasn't just sports. It wasn't just this and that. It was a way of life. The American way of life versus the Russian way of life. That was the rivalry that Miracle on Ice really solved for a lot of people in this country.
Obviously, we didn't beat them on talent at all because it's no question that they were the supremely more talented team. So, in order to beat a team like that, you really have to create a system. So Herb Brooks obviously did a hell of a job with what he did with that squad. But I just want to know, how in the hell did the Soviets allow themselves to be beat like that, because you got to take in mind, because obviously, Soviets, Russia, same difference, yada yada yada. Like, these guys take their hockey seriously, and just to give a more modern example, two of the best hockey players in the world right now, Nikita Kucherov, Alex Ovechkin, they both hail from Russia. So it's no secret that Russia is a hockey haven. So you got to wonder, how in the world did these guys allow themselves to be beat by a bunch of amateurs?
Well, they were also an older team. They were a Russian team that had been together for more than 12, probably 15 years. And that's old, tired legs going against a bunch of college kids that had nothing to lose. They had everything to gain and nothing to lose, and were more energetic. They were really tougher uh, because they knew it was going to take everything to beat the Russians, and there was no doubting that.
So, in other words, it sounds like what you're saying is that the Soviets, in a way, kind of, it was like they expected to, and they didn't try as hard, whereas the U.S. men's team gave it everything they got, because they that could have been their last game, and
Mhm.
whenever it's your last time in anything, of course you're going to give it everything you've got.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So that was obviously a very iconic moment, but there's other iconic moments as well. And Ed, do you remember the 1988 World Series? Do you remember anything about that time?
I do, I do. That was really a difference of two styles of baseball at that time. The A's were coming in with the Bash brothers, Mark McGuire, Jose Canseco. They were they had all the posters and all the media, for as much media as you could get during that time period.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about the Dodgers, it was Tommy Lasorda and that pitching staff, Mike Scioscia as a catcher, Oral Hershiser as having one of the greatest years in MLB history, with his scoreless streak that happened during that year. So it was really a tale of two different teams. The new wave of teams with these big, muscular, and super fast, maybe juiced a little bit, players,
Yeah.
versus the old school guys that just knew how to do it and were really good at doing it. When you
So
get down to, you were going to say, David?
no, no, no. You can go ahead. I didn't
Oh,
realize that you were still talking.
so when you got down to the end of that game one, because that's when this iconic moment happened, Dennis Eckersley was the door shut. This was Mariano Rivera before Mariano Rivera as a closer. And here comes hobbling old guy, two bad knees, just just can't barely make it to the plate, but he's being put in to to catapult the Dodgers over the A's, and he does it. Now that it was just dripping with excitement for a couple of reasons. One, the TV broadcast was being done by Vin Scully. The
Mm,
the radio broadcast was also covering from the Dodgers' point of view, because this was at Dodger Stadium, and the way that announcers really describe the game at that time, whether it's on radio or television, just added to the fuel of how much investment you had into the game. And I will proudly say Ben Scully is the goat of announcers in my opinion, and it's going to be hard for somebody to break that. Just because of the way he engaged everybody while he was calling the plays. Uh,
yeah.
but the call itself was after Kirk Gibson, got around first base and was rounding second. After the ball went over right field, I don't believe what I just saw. That was nobody could just fathom what was happening when this old rusty guy went up, and it was it was a huge gamble to have Tommy Lasorda put him in that spot to try and beat the unbeatable Dennis Eckersley at that time. So that was just such a iconic, not just moment, but the calls that go with these moments are part of what has grasped my imagination as a kid, seeing these things happen. Uh, David, do you have a similar moment more in your lifetime that kind of grasps your imagination as well?
Um, as far as like moments like as far as moments like that go, I do have I don't remember what was said on TV, but I do remember one moment that I'll never forget, and it was the 2011 World Series between the Rangers and the Cardinals, and the Cardinals were down to their final strike, and David Freese. Enough said. And yeah, but well, wait, why are you shaking your head? I would assume that as a Astros fan, you would be happy about that.
I know way too many Texas Rangers fans, and being a fan of anything Texas except the Cowboys, that hurt
Yeah.
me because we had not at to that point no team in Texas had won a World Series. So
Mm,
and to be one
yeah.
strike
True.
away, it was just it was gut wrenching.
And what's also crazy, Ed, was the Cardinals were down to their final strike not once but twice. So it's like, yeah, okay, like it's like the baseball gods were saying, okay, Rangers, you screwed up one time. We're gonna give you one more chance. Oh, look at that! Like you just screwed that up as well. But I want to go back to the '88 World Series. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ed. But the A's back then, like, say they were a dynasty, but weren't they one of the better teams, one of the best teams during that time period?
Oh, absolutely. They were the best team in baseball, hands down, at that time. But they only wound up getting one World Series. Very much like the Braves ran into
Yeah,
during the stretch of the 90s. They were that team before the Braves had their run. They were so talented and so good. And Tony La Russa is such a good manager, just just working all the right keys. And they had a great pitching staff too, with Dave Stewart as the ace of that staff. You know, so yes, they were the best team in baseball at that time, but winning a lot of games in the regular season doesn't necessarily mean winning the playoffs. And we've talked about it on this show, the President's Cup
yeah,
curse in hockey. That's kind of what the A's and the Braves went through for all of the 90s, in my opinion.
yeah. I mean, really, it feels like nowadays getting the best record in any kind of sport just kind of seems like a curse. And when we're talking about baseball, if I remember correctly, I think the last team to clinch the best regular season in a full season, by the way, so the 60 game COVID season doesn't count. But the last team to have the most wins in the regular season and then win the World Series, I believe that was the Boston Red Sox in 2018. Because I remember the Astros had the best record in 2019, but they got upset by the Nationals in the World Series, and then 2020 was a COVID year, and then 2021 was the Braves. I know the Braves did not have the best record. 2022, the Astros. I think you guys had one of the best records, but I don't think you had the best record. And then 2023, of course, was the Rangers, and I remember they did not have the best record. So it's
They
been a
didn't even win
while.
their division.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, like it came down to the final day when they lost the division to the Astros, but of course in the end that didn't matter. So, but
Exactly.
yeah, but let me ask you this, because I'm wondering, for you, Ed, what a what is an iconic play that happened that just got absolutely ruined by a horrible call on TV? And I can tell you the first thing that comes to mind for me, right? It was 2008, okay, the year 2008 for the 2007 season. I think you know where I'm going with this. It was the Super Bowl between the underdog Giants and juggernaut Patriots, a team that just kicked everybody's ass. They were on the verge of becoming the first 19-0 team ever. And David Tyree with the helmet catch, and then I think it was Joe Buck, if I remember correctly. How does he describe it? And it is caught by David Tyree. Like, what the hell was that? Like,
Yeah.
no, did he just catch it with his helmet? That might be the most bizarre catch I've ever seen. If you were just listening to that game on the radio, you would have thought that it was just a regular catch. Like, Joe Buck, what the heck were you thinking? One of the most iconic moments of all time, and you completely ruined it with the mediocre call on TV.
When it comes to calling on TV versus calling on the radio, uh, it's a different thing altogether. So I would say yes, Joe Buck has understated the TV game for a very long time, because plays like that, they need the emphasis on how special and rare and exciting those plays were. Because that was a fourth down play. That was, if the Giants don't get it, the game's over and there's a perfect season. I mean, it's just that simple. For Joe Buck to kind of ho hum it, that was terrible. But when you're on TV, the play has to kind of speak for itself a little bit. You can add to the excitement of it, which he obviously does not in any way,
Mm-hmm.
shape, or form. But
Yeah.
the play itself needs to be able to speak for itself, uh, beyond just two guys describing what's going on in the field. And that is where Joe Buck drops the ball. But overall, I'm not in the Joe Buck hate camp. I think he does a phenomenal job, but there are plays that need the excitement of a Gus Johnson that Joe Buck just can't do. Because Gus
So are
Johnson, his head would explode if that play were to happen with him calling the game.
so and maybe your answer was the same as mine, but do you recall any ridiculous iconic moments on the field or ice or court happening being ruined by a mediocre call on the radio or TV? Do you remember anything like that?
So I go back to Pat Summerall, which he he was one of the announcers that really everybody looked up to, but he rarely let the his call get in the way of the play, and that's kind of where the Joe Buck idea comes from. But the fact that there wasn't much said in Super Bowl 31 when Desmond Howard caught the ball on the 2 yard line and ran it 98 yards for a touchdown that basically shut the door on the Patriots, uh, and getting the win for the Packers. There was nothing said during that entire play. So, yes, there should be something said to be excitable, but there was nothing. It was dead air from Desmond Howard has the ball and he's going to make it to the end zone. I mean, it's that's all there was. That was such a huge play that I'm like, what? You know, where the exact opposite, I think it was appropriately called when Boise State pulled out the bag against Oklahoma in the Fiesta Bowl to win that ball game, and you know, because the end of that game had everything. It was just insane. There was just insanity all over the field. But the announcers for that game, I think they called that appropriately with not getting in the way of the play, but adding to the excitement of what the plays were. It was just
Yeah,
it was very well done in my opinion.
absolutely. By the way, there is actually a more recent iconic moment that happened. I can't believe that I actually forgot about it. But it was when the Tampa Bay Lightning won their second straight cup, and I think it was Marv Albert's son who made the call, if I remember correctly, and it was just lightning strikes twice because one, like we know that's an actual phrase that people use, lightning strikes twice, and of course with a team like the Tampa Bay Lightning winning back to back cups, it would have been the whole entire Stanley Cup Finals would have been ruined if that call, lightning strikes twice, wasn't made. It was the absolute perfect call at the absolute perfect time.
And that is the mark of the best announcers out there that can translate the excitement without overstepping the play. Absolutely, in my
Exactly.
opinion. I mean, there are some announcers that are in it for themselves, and growing up, you know, there was one announcer that really embodied that statement, and that was Howard Cosell. He was
Mm,
a phenomenal fight announcer, but he was a bit pretentious and a bit all about himself.
yeah.
And that eventually got him fired from all announcing because of a terrible comparison that call that he made during a Monday Night Football game. But one of the most iconic calls he ever did was "Down goes Frazier." That was from the 1973 fight between George Foreman, yes, that George Foreman that sold all those grills, and Joe Frazier. It was a fight that was in Kingston, Jamaica. At that time, the heavyweight division was they were gods at in the fight game. You know, these lower level fight classes, they are a little bit lower level. They don't gain as much attention as a heavyweight class. So when you saw the belts be moved from Muhammad Ali to Joe Frazier to George Foreman, you know, at that time Joe Frazier was one of the baddest men in the on the planet. And the fact that he was being knocked down by George Foreman, that's where that call comes from. And one of the most iconic photos of all time is Muhammad Ali standing over somebody, being knocked down. So, yes, the boxing during that time period, especially in the heavyweight division, it lended itself to iconic moments because it was just such a different animal than what you see nowadays. Now you see a lot of speed, a lot of technical boxing, and all this other stuff. That was pure power, pure stand in the middle of the ring and just hit people. Muhammad Ali was a little bit different, but he would still knock you out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I gotta say, when it comes to when it comes to announcing these iconic moments, these iconic plays, these things that happen, I kind of feel like you have to have a sort of creative mind to like really capture the essence of what happened, because obviously anybody can describe what they saw on TV or what they saw in real life. But to me, it takes a sort of unique kind of talent to really capture the essence, to really kind of, it's almost like you're creating a movie for everybody around you to hear in that moment, if that makes any sense.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Uh, you know, and there are those voices through since television began that really tells has told so many stories. You look at your Keith Jacksons, you look at your Dick Enbergs, you look at your Howard Cosell's, you look at your Gus Johnsons, you look at your even Joe Bucks, you look at your Jim Nance, Vern Lundquist. There's I can't believe I hadn't said him before, but Tim Brando. There's you know there are all these voices that is what they're designed to do. That is what they know that they should be doing. And I have absolutely loved the telling of that story ever since I was a kid, because it just pulls you in more into loving the sport that you're watching when you see somebody at their craft do it at that high level.
100%. And you can also tell when somebody is just doing it because they're naturally gifted at it, and instead of forcing it. But you know something, Ed, we've been talking about iconic moments in pro sports. We haven't really talked about iconic moments in college sports, even though we did. Like, the U.S. men's team was sort of a college team, but they also sort of weren't. But
Sure.
the '05 national championship game between Texas and USC. You know, Texas wasn't a big underdog, but they were an underdog nonetheless. They were going up against a team that was trying to go for a three-peat. I mean, you being a Texas fan, I can only imagine the nerves that you were feeling going through your body, but just kind of take us through that. Just relive that moment right here.
Have you ever seen somebody that has the flu and their fever breaks all at one time? That's the amount of sweating that was going on watching that game, because it was just pouring bullets of sweat down my face, just shaking watching that entire game unfold. You know, from Keith Jackson's first call of, "Well, let's play some football." Yippee! You know, that he actually said that on air during the kickoff, because there was such a hype to this collision. Everybody could see this collision waiting to happen. It almost didn't happen because of Notre Dame, and that's where we get the Bush push. Uh,
Yeah.
that was that season. So when we get down to that, the moments that defined that national championship game, it was 4th and 1. USC, if they make it, they run out the clock. Game's over. Texas puts on a stand and then gives the ball back to Vince Young, who ended the game with 487 yards of total offense by
Is that a
himself.
is that a record, or has that been is that a record?
In a championship game, I think that's a record.
Okay.
287 yards passing, 200 yards rushing.
Oh my gosh.
He was invincible. Yes, I stole that from Dan Fouts, because he didn't hold anything back.
Yeah.
Uh, but when it got down to crunch time, you knew the ball was going to be in Vince's hands. And you could hear it in the call. 4th and 8 with the national championship on the line. He's going for the corner. He's got it. The entire stadium, as that was the end zone in which all the Texas fans were sitting. So you can imagine the
Mm,
delirium that
yeah.
was in that corner of the Rose Bowl during that time. And Keith Jackson's call, you know, gave you that build up and then paid it off with "he's got it," because it was all Vince. There, everybody was there to support Vince, but this was Vince's championship
Mm.
because he was the offense that day. there were some wonky things that happened, but yes, that was Vince's game. And they, as Dan Fouts sitting right there, who was a good color guy, and in reality, not the buffoon that they showed in the Waterboy. In reality, Bounce was like, you could have the perfect defense called for him, but you're not going to beat him. And that's exactly what happened with the end of that game. And mind you, that is the second three-peat that the University of Texas had thwarted uh, Big 12. The season in the Big 12 championship game, they thwarted Nebraska's three-peat chance by winning the Big 12 championship. This was just done at the national championship level.
That's really cool. And I think what's also really interesting too, Ed, is that in that moment, like during the season as it was happening, you didn't really think of Texas as being like, obviously Texas was very good. I mean, they won the national championship, but you didn't. There wasn't really that vibe that they were the best team or one of the best teams because they were also playing during the same time that USC, the two-time defending national champion, was playing. So obviously all the attention, or most of the attention, was going to USC. It's very similar to back in 2018 when Alabama in Tua Tagovailoa's first year as a starter, they were just straight up destroying everybody, and they were the defending national champions themselves. And then meanwhile, you had Clemson that was just as dominant, but nobody was really talking about them because it was all about Alabama. And then of course Clemson beats Alabama, and now we look back and we recognize that 2018 Clemson team as one of the best teams of all time. Well, it's the same thing with Texas, because after they beat that juggernaut USC team, now they're viewed rightfully so as one of the greatest college football teams of all time, because I remember that Texas team just straight up massacred everybody on their schedule.
Absolutely. Yeah, all the way through the Big 12 championship game where they beat Colorado, I think it was 63-3. Something ridiculous like that. And Vince came into that game ticked off because he had rightfully earned the Heisman that year, and they gave it to one of the USC guys. I can't remember because both Leinart and Bush had won Heisman's, so they were both there, and Vince Young was the third person that was sitting there waiting to get there, waiting to see who was going to find out who got the Heisman that year. And the fact that Vince didn't get it, he to this day will tell you it's because Mac Brown would pull him in the second half, third quarter of ball games, because there was no chance that the other team was going to come back against them, because they were just racking up yardage and points, and they were just so dominant going through the schedule that year. The only close call they had, uh, if I remember correctly, was at Kansas when they just kind of had a flat, we're just going to walk in here and win. And it didn't, they had to garner up some stuff at the end of that game. There was also the Halloween game against Oklahoma State. But other than that, everything else was just a cakewalk. Even the Red River shootout. Yes, I said shootout. Was a cakewalk that year as well. So yes, that Texas team, one of the best there ever was. However, their their greatness got cut short because Vince left a year early, and then they were starting a redshirt freshman the next year by the name of McCoy, Colt McCoy. So they did not have the longevity of championships that USC had, but for 1 year, one time, one game, Texas was the best team in the country. Period.
Absolutely. And for the record, I think it was Leinart who won in '05, because I remember Bush winning it in '04 the year before, if I remember correctly. But let me ask you, Ed, are there any other iconic college sports moments that you can remember?
Oh, there's there's one simply known as the play. Are you familiar with this one, David?
Uh, you might need to refresh my memory, man.
So in 1982, Cal versus Stanford, huge rivalry game. John Elway being the quarterback for Stanford. This was before he got drafted by the Colts, moved to the Broncos, that whole story. Uh, he he leads Stanford to a touchdown to take the lead with seconds left. And by kicking the ball off, it was essentially going to end the game. Well, what is affectionately known at this point as the pitchy pitchy woo woo play, that started to take place, and that is the first game that I remember it being a thing. The whole pitchy pitchy, trying to play rugby and get somebody free. Well, the band for Stanford had basically said, "Okay, game's over. We're just going to go out into the field and do our thing." Well, the play wasn't over yet, so during the so there was, I believe there were 7 or 8 pitchbacks. Eventually, I got to a player that got free, and the call was, "The band is on the field. The band is on the field." Because by the time the Cal player got to the end zone, he jumped in the end zone, and he actually landed on the trombone player, bent the trombone, knocked him down to the ground, but yet the game was over. Cal beat Stanford that year, and it was just an insane, just chaotic scene with all these band members on basically covering the end zone like ants. And here comes this football player, just, "Yay, we won!" Smash! He really smashed into him like he was the Hulk, going through downtown New York. It was just that type of motion with the ball in his hands. And it was just pure insanity. I mean, yes, there's other iconic plays that are out there, but that is the one that is called the play for a very good reason. There's not another play that matches that one in college football uh, that can be called the play the way that
Mm.
that one was.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of want to converse about iconic moments that happened in other sports as well, and I want to start off with basketball. And so for me, and there's lots of iconic moments, but one moment for me that I'll never forget was the Mavs in 2011, and I'm not even going to talk about their championship. Even though obviously that was a huge freaking deal for them, it was their first championship in franchise history. But of course, everybody talks about that. Everybody knows how special that was for them. But for me, I'm going to talk about a moment that essentially led up to that, and it was the second round Dallas Mavericks against the Los Angeles Lakers, and they swept the Lakers. Like, not just they didn't just sweep the Lakers, Ed. They just completely embarrassed them. And in game four, especially, oh my gosh, I think they beat the Lakers by like 40 points or more. And Kobe was still with the Lakers. And that moment was pretty much the end of Kobe's reign over the NBA. Like, yeah, he still played for some time after that, but it was that moment, game 4, when the Lakers got destroyed by Dallas. It was that moment that really marked the end of Kobe's reign, Kobe's run of dominating the NBA. Really, the Lakers, but Kobe's run, yeah.
Sure. Uh, I will say the one that gets me is, I believe it was 92. The 92 finals, uh, Jordan's Bulls against the Portland Trailblazers. And first half of that game, Jordan goes off. He hits like 5 3-pointers, and he was just such a hot shooter. He's like, I don't know what's going on, but I'm going to keep playing it. You know, I mean,
Was that the shrug game?
yeah, that was the
Nice.
shrug game.
Yeah,
He's like,
I could tell when.
I don't
Yeah.
know. I'm just shooting, and nobody could stop it. And after the first half of that series was over. There was there was no shot for Clyde Drexler's uh, uh, Trailblazers to come back and put up any kind of fight against that team.
I'm here.
Okay,
All
uh,
right, gonna have to do more edits. That's all good.
yeah, a couple more.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. We left off with Jordan. So. All right. Yeah. So. You know, one thing I want to ask about you, Edmund. We might have talked about it before, but obviously, even if you weren't around during the time, I think most historians, most people who are fans of the sport of basketball in general, they know that Michael Jordan had to deal with the beast known as the Bad Boy Pistons, and after Michael Jordan and the Bulls finally vanquished their demons, was there a feeling like obviously after that happened, I imagine, I'm sure the Bulls were expected to win the finals because it's Jordan, but after they beat the Pistons in the manner in which they did, was there
Mhm.
this sort of feeling that they were just going to run the NBA for the foreseeable future after that happened?
At that point, Jordan was still up and coming. Believe it or not, he was already a superstar, but now that he had the team around him, he was able to don that leadership role that we all know Jordan to have. And as Kobe put it, become Black Jesus when he was asked about Jordan. So, yes, it was kind of known that the Bulls were going to be there for a while. We didn't realize that it was going to be 6 championships in 8 years, which it would have been 8 championships if baseball hadn't gotten in the way.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a big part of it. Uh, the fact that the Bulls beat the Lakers in the finals that year and 4 games to 1, uh, it, once you saw that take place, that effectively ended the Showtime Lakers and it ended the Bad Boy Pistons, and it was time for the Bulls to just stampede their way through the '90s.
Yeah, 100%. What are some other iconic moments, like when the Astros won the World Series in 2017 for the first
Mhm.
time? Obviously, that was iconic for the franchise. But are there any calls on TV or radio that you remember that stick out to you?
Oh, there's been calls. I would I would say I run into like more regional calls because I do spend a lot more time watching Texas than I do national. Uh, just maybe I should watch more national stuff, but uh, we have had the same commentator call Texas sports for over 20 years, and he is phenomenal. His name is Craig Way. Shout out, Craig. Uh, and his calls are always amazing, but they're mainly for Texas Longhorn fans. As far as nationwide sports that are calls that supersede everything, man, there's we watch so many sports and we watch so many things. One call that uh, isn't necessarily shown as iconic, but one that sticks out to me is the perfect game that wasn't
Mm.
by Galarraga of the Tigers when
Oh,
when he hit
yeah.
first base for the 27th out, and the runner was called safe, and there was no replay to dispute that
Mm,
call and create the perfect game. That's a moment that sticks out to me. Absolutely. There's the there's obviously the Packers Super Bowl against the Steelers, uh, which the more iconic one for me on that was their divisional game against the Falcons, which Aaron Rodgers just kind of picked the Falcons apart that year
yeah,
uh, as a
100%.
six seed going into number one seed Atlanta. He just shredded them to pieces. I mean, what have you seen, David, that kind of sticks out?
I mean, I definitely do. I definitely do remember that game where Aaron Rodgers just totally dominated the and that wasn't that the year that you guys won the Super Bowl? I think I remember that.
It is. It is.
Yeah, I remember that, and if I remember correctly, the Falcons had the best record in the league, or they had the best record in the NFC at least. They had 13 wins, and of course, before you talk about how Michael Jordan at the time was an up and comer, well, Aaron Rodgers was also an up and comer. We all know how good he was, but that was really, sort of his coming out party. But for me, other moments that I remember, one thing that kind of sticks out to mind for me, like I don't know if it was like one particular iconic thing per se, but it was the 2008 Summer Olympics, which I think was held in Beijing, and I was 14 years old at the time. And before then, I didn't really care about swimming. But then I saw some fish humanoid dude by the name of Michael Phelps, and just seeing the way that he dominated him, it just it just blew me away. Like, as I said before, I wasn't really interested in swimming before, like just swimming as a sport, watching it. But there's
Mhm.
just something about the way that one person just totally dominates the entire field that you just keep your eyes glued on the television, and I was just completely enamored with what I saw, and pretty much right away, Michael Phelps became hands down my favorite Olympian of all time. Like he is, I mean, just by accolades alone, he is the best Olympian of all time. But
Mhm.
but back when he was still competing in the, because I like watching the Olympics. But Michael Phelps was the one Olympian that I always look forward to watching. It didn't matter what I was doing. Didn't matter what was on my schedule. If Michael Phelps
Mhm.
was on, I'm watching him. I was watching him dominate.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And the fact that he won so many medals in such a short amount of time, uh, the longer he went, you knew he was going to win more. Uh, just what was it, 14 in one Olympiad that he
Yeah,
won?
there was
It
one
was
Olympic year, man, where he went berserk.
exactly. And another athlete that went berserk that one he that still resonates to this day. When he's on television, everybody watches, and that's Tiger Woods.
Hmm.
I I don't necessarily play golf myself, but if Tiger Woods is on TV, I'm gonna watch it, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. Ever since the round in Pebble Beach in the late '90s, that he just destroyed everybody, and he announced his presence to the world, and basically intimidated the entire PGA just by showing up.
Hmm.
It was just it was an amazing thing to see. Between that and his British Open victory at St Andrews, what a time period that he had, and there was no stopping it. Now there was absolutely the shot that commercials have been made about and all this stuff with the Nike ball rolling in off the chip of the green. I believe that was the Masters in 2019, but I could be wrong on that one. There's so many moments that can be had in golf, and Tiger Woods just took all those moments and just made them basically a series. You could string all those moments into a series and not stop watching it for days just
Yeah.
because of how good he was over such a long period of time.
Yeah, definitely. Um, and when it comes to Michael Phelps, like I want to share something that just illustrates how purely dominant of an athlete he was. It was 2016, I think, and I think I remember reading a piece how during that entire summer, and again, this is just based on what I remember. So people who are watching this, if I get anything wrong, my apologies. But this is what I remember. But apparently, during that year, Michael Phelps, like personally, mentally had a really bad year. He was dealing with a
Mhm.
lot of mental health struggles. He and his trainer butted heads like all the time, and he barely practiced at all. If he did practice, well, you know what happened? He still dominated the field, right? Like, just think about that. Think about how naturally gifted you are when you're just dealing with a bunch of personal crap. You're barely training. You're butting heads with your trainer. It's not going well for you at all, and yet you still dominate the field. Like, it's just crazy to me.
Yeah, and it just goes to show that uh, that mutants are alive, and that Michael Phelps definitely proved himself to be a mutant when it came uh, to the Olympiads.
Yeah.
And as far as another Olympic moment that stands out to me is in '96 when Kerry Strug hit the vault and won for the U.S. team after all the turmoil of those Olympics with the bombing and all that other stuff that happened. That was a defining moment for those games, not the tragedy that took place. So that
Mm.
was definitely a good one as well.
Yeah. Well, if anybody does not believe in aliens, well, I think Michael Phelps is a proof that aliens certainly exist. But folks, thank you once again for tuning into another episode of Total Sports Talk. I'm David Street. That's my co-host Ed Smith. And guys, check out other shows on American Daily Press. Check out Guys Night. Check out Brita Unfiltered, check out Quirks of Creation, and check out all the amazing content that we have on American Daily Press. But until next time, guys, we are rounding third and headed for home.